one of the things that I want to do is make videos for people explaining some of the things that when they try to use machine translation, like Google Translate or DeepL, things that do work, things that don't work, why they do work, why they don't work. And in this case, I came across this. Here, you can see there. This
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
little can of Portuguese wine. Quite nice. Um, and I said to my daughter, I said, well, I assume that gatao means cat, but let's check it out. And I went online, and on one of them, I think it was on Google, it had hunk or stud. And then on DeepL, it just
Oh,
said big cat or tomcat or something like that. So
right.
then when I went to an actual dictionary, it said it's either a cat, a large cat, or a wild cat, or it can be a sexy man, a hunk or a stud. But
Yeah,
one of them, when you use the machine translation, because they're not designed as a dictionary, they're just pulling this out of what they have. It has to give you an answer, but
yeah.
it has to choose. And so if you're using these things as a dictionary, it's like, okay, well, is it a 50-50 if they're
Completely different meanings.
completely different meanings? So which would you say is more common for gatao? For
So one would be kind of slang. So when you do the ow at the end,
mm-hmm.
it means you're just um, it's the same as saying big something
Uh-huh.
in English. It's augmentative, or I don't know.
Uh-huh.
It's a direct translation from the Portuguese, I guess. But so you could do that to almost every word. And especially in the Brazilian Portuguese, it's very, very common that they use that for words that you wouldn't expect.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so the normal usage of the word would be to say a big cat. You would say get down, just because it's exactly what that means.
So a regular sized cat would be gato.
Gato, gato,
Gato,
yes.
yes.
Basically, you use the AO with the tilde to do the augmentative thing. That's basically the same as saying big something.
Mm-hmm.
So cat would be a big cat in English, and you could say like two separate words, or you could use get down as a big cat.
Uh-huh.
The other word is kind of a slang, is sometimes you call a person a cat because they're attractive,
Mm-hmm.
and so I guess it does come from the Brazilian Portuguese where you say get down as like as you were saying, the other meaning.
Right. So
But
okay.
yeah, it would be slang. I think it would be considered slang.
Mm-hmm. So I'm wondering. I think it was Google that had that as the only option. So I'm wondering where in their source material where they're getting that from, because they wouldn't. That would be something where they have some sort of parallel text where someone has translated Gatsao as a good-looking guy, and that's where what they think it is, and they haven't in their parallel text come across uh, an instance where somebody has translated it as big cat.
That's interesting. It could be because I wouldn't expect the word to be in the dictionary for the normal meaning as well, because it's just a rule that you can basically apply to everything. So you wouldn't expect every noun to have that augmentative thing in the dictionary. And the other one, if it's eventually listed, it could show up. So maybe that's why. I don't know.
So could you do that, for example, with headphones? If you had small headphones, they would be regular headphones, but these big clunky things would have the augmentative ending.
Interesting. I guess you could. It's just because we in Portuguese we say phones a lot of time using the English word, and of course you couldn't do that with an English word.
Right.
But if you use the Portuguese word for that, which would be, I think, auscultadores, which is a very weird name, by the way, you could say auscultadorzões. Yeah, you can do it to every word, but
Uh-huh.
again, people would be like, no one says that.
Right. Well, we
But
have a
they would
sim.
understand. They would understand.
Right. We'd have a. There's a similar thing in Swahili with the augmentatives or diminutives, and so you wouldn't normally do it, for example, with motorcycle. But if you wanted to distinguish the big motorcycle versus the little dirt bike, you could go and throw in that augmentative just to give it some extra punch.
Yeah, definitely. For motorcycle, that would work very well in Portuguese. So a lot of people would go mota for a normal motorcycle and motão for like a big, powerful motorcycle. And that
Do
would
that.
be common.
Do that again more slowly.
So mota
Hmm.
and then motão.
Okay. I think I heard the difference. So explain this funny tilde that goes on top of these vowels.
Right. So in this case, you actually get the AO, but the sound that you would be changing is the A, of course.
Right.
And it turns from like a flat A. So we don't open the vowels in Portuguese, right? So we wouldn't say mota in a
Hmm.
very obvious A sound. We would say mota, which is not very common.
Hmm.
And then when you add the tilde, it goes like a very nasal sound. So it go motan in the sense that there would be better words that don't have the O, so they would have the exact same spelling.
Okay.
So if you try, for example, menye, which is being I don't know, being sneaky or something,
Hmm.
you could say menye. Again, the A at the end goes menye,
Hmm.
or you could go menye. And this is very subtle difference. I'm going to say
Again.
again, menye and menye.
Okay.
So and the second one is more from the nose, and it gets the tilde, and it means morning. So completely different word.
Uh huh. Is it something that do you think? I mean, you're not a Portuguese teacher, so maybe you haven't don't have the experience. Is it something that a foreigner learning Portuguese would pick up quickly, slowly, never?
What I would say is that usually most of the sounds that don't exist in other languages, usually what I think happens, or at least that's how people are taught, they exaggerate the sounds a lot.
Hmm.
So it would go like manhã and then manhã or manhã, and they would open the vowels and try to make it very nasal, just because I think as with everything, it's difficult if they try to do the very subtle thing that native speakers would be able to do, if
Hmm.
that makes sense.
Yeah. So when I was learning French, you might have had the same experience with French. There are certain vowels that I just still cannot hear the difference. There's the word above and the word below, or something like dessus and dessous, and
Yeah.
there's a difference there somewhere. I can't hear it. Sometimes, if I try really hard, I can hear it or even say it. If I'm totally concentrating. But in the normal course of life, I would never know whether somebody's saying something is above or below. Um, and
Yeah, I feel those things in these things. Sometimes it's just that people understand the theory.
mhm.
So they know that they're supposed to do a nasal sound and they're supposed to sound a bit like this. But then it's very hard to go to the point where they would sound native just because it's a slight change. And of course, a native person would notice. But then, as I was saying before, menge and menge, some people listening to this video might not be able to tell a difference, especially if it was in a conversation. I bet some people would be very confused about which word was being used.
Uh-huh.
And for us, it's completely obvious.